So in fact, it turns out that Bitcoin is the most valuable use of energy, or maybe the most valuable, most compelling industrial customer of energy in the world right now. Partner with technology companies, but they also partner with political jurisdictions and politicians. And the beauty of proof of work is it is an open protocol that is Darwinian and competitive in a way such that it is not just self-correcting on the protocol level to ensure correct money, but it's also self-healing and it's adaptive to the environment around it. So I like to call these the 7 layers of security. So what do you have? You have an energy layer, a technology layer, a political layer, a financial layer, a network layer, a spatial layer, and a temporal layer of energy. Those seven various dimensions. So let's start with the first dimension of security, energy. I have a hash rate. Say we've got about 100 exahash right now. Well, I have to feed it energy in order to create the 100 exahash. Bitcoin is a big customer of energy. So in fact, it turns out that Bitcoin is the most valuable use of energy, or maybe the most valuable, most compelling industrial customer of energy in the world right now. You can generate about 40 cents a kilowatt hour in revenue mining Bitcoin. So that makes it interesting because that co-ops all the energy industry. So one way that Bitcoin spreads and stays organically vital is it forms partnerships with the energy industry. If you have a volcano in the middle of Central America, the value of that energy sold within 500 miles of you is like 1 penny a kilowatt hour. Unless you sell it to Bitcoin, and it's 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So Bitcoin is the best customer for your volcano. Bitcoin is a customer of stranded energy, intermittent energy, energy on any frequency, and energy at any scale. And you don't need to be co-located with with an industrial customer or a consumer. And you don't need bandwidth. So for example, what's the second best, use of energy? Maybe like running Netflix or Google data center. But if you want to run a Google data center, you need to be within fiber optic distance of the major switching networks, because you're streaming video and streaming a lot of high bandwidth queries. So they're bandwidth intensive, and they need to be triple redundant because they need to be, they can't fail. If you're trying to operate a car with Google Maps, you can't afford to have an outage in the network. So Bitcoin miners are so much better than a typical data center, because you could monetize the entire volcano, or you could monetize the entire waterfall, or the entire nuclear reactor, the full bandwidth of it. You could do it at the North Pole. You can do it with a satellite uplink. And you can monetize intermittent energy coming off of wind or wave or solar. And you can also shut it down in a heartbeat with fairly low economic cost. So that makes Bitcoin the most compelling technology for the energy industry that's come along this decade, maybe in a long time. The last big energy technology was aluminum, when people would use their excess their excess energy to smelt aluminum. Well, Bitcoin rebuilt that, but in spades. To do Bitcoin mining, you don't need a port to ship aluminum in and out of. You don't need an aluminum factory, which is difficult, and you don't need aluminum ore. And you also don't need the industrial demand for aluminum, which eventually saturates. Aluminum is a specialty metal.
Right.
So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is money.
Yeah.
Okay, so half of everything that the human race has is Bitcoin. So that the second layer, though, is technology. And this, I don't think people really understand that well. And when I talk about technology, I'm referring to Bitcoin ASIC miners. You know, Bitcoin is a wall of encrypted energy. So the energy is the first part, but the encryption, the crypto is the second part, the crypto wall of energy. It's not raw energy. If it was raw energy, you just need 100 terawatt hours to start to get parity. But when it's encrypted energy, I need 100 exahash of SHA-256 mining equipment. And since it's like 10,000 miners, right, to get to an exahash right now, that's a million mining rigs of the latest build. How do you come up with 1 million mining rigs? You know, it's like, no one's got 1 million mining rigs sitting around. I mean, it's not clear how long it would take to manufacture 1 million mining rigs.
Right.
Bitcoin's co-opting technology companies. So Bitmain is a big player, but there are other big players too. And as Bitcoin gets larger, I think you'll see the Intels of the world, and you'll see other semiconductor companies designing Bitcoin mining rigs and getting into space. And this is another example where this is open and competitive. You know, who wants it the most? Whoever wants it. And what capital you need? This is semiconductor fabrication capital. You have to fabricate these ASICs. The S19 family is 5 times more efficient than the S9s. So if you wanted to generate an exahash on the S9 family, it took 150 megawatts of power. That's a lot of power. If you wanted to do it with S19s, it's 30 megawatts of power. A 5x difference in a generation. If you get through two generations every 10 years or 3, right? You know, you're talking about 20x improvement. I mean, we're 100x more technically efficient today than we were 8 years ago. When you understand the Bitcoin network, what you can think is that the Bitcoin mining network 10 years ago was very energy intensive and technology poor. There's a time when you were just using off-the-shelf chips, and then you were using GPUs, and then you were using ASIC first generation, and then ASIC next generation. So we're like 5 generations into this now. In the early time frame, think about it, you throw probably 1,000 times, if not 1 million times as much energy to generate a hash. But we'll get to the next generation where it'll be 5 megawatts. And then what happens when we get to 1 megawatt? Well, so as you go out, energy is still important, but it turns out that the network is rotating from energy intensive security to technology intensive security. Bitcoin miners partner with energy companies, and they partner with technology companies, but they also partner with political jurisdictions and politicians. What happens if you're a Bitcoin miner and you set up $1 billion Bitcoin mining rig in New York City, and then there's a new mayor and he outlaws Bitcoin mining? What happens to your capital? So Bitcoin miners have skin in the game. And because they have skin in the game, that means that they have to do their due diligence, and they've got a long time horizon. A person that's mining Bitcoin is looking out 5 years, looking out 10. You kind of want to be in a jurisdiction where you think that a decade from now, you'll still be able to mine Bitcoin. And so it forces you to be more thoughtful. You know, and the next step is, well, I just invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this county. I guess I probably better contribute to the county election and get the mayor elected, right? Because you have a vested interest, because you have something to lose. So the Bitcoin mining network actually becomes a political lobbying network for Bitcoin.
Interesting.
And then every politician that has a Bitcoin mine has tax revenue, has, when New York wanted to ban Bitcoin mining, that was blocked by a politician because the politician got a letter from the union. And the union said, we're going to lose jobs.
Huh.
So all the money that flows into creating mining centers creates jobs, creates tax revenue, supports politicians, creates massive revenues for engineering companies, for real estate companies, for landlords, et cetera. It's good for the local economy.